Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Software Engineering. I'm Zhang Shuang from Software College, Northeastern University. In the last lecture, we have discussed about the importance of requirements. And we have understood that the requirements is the root and the source of the target software system. And only with a proper requirements can we get a good chance to achieve a good target software system. Okay, so the question that you will ask is that how to achieve requirements? How to achieve proper requirements? Okay, so let's learn together. Okay. How to achieve requirements? The first point that we should understand about requirement achieving is that we should never take this task with any romantic thought. That means requirement achievement is very practical. It's something real, something practical. That means we should do it carefully. There are 3 steps to achieve requirements. Step 1, preparation. Step 2, requirements elicitation and recording and analysis. And step 3, requirements documentation. Step 4, requirements confirmation. Okay, let's learn it one by one. Step 1, preparation. Actually, there are 3 steps for preparation. Step 1, to determine what to elicit and capture for this task, and the ways to do it, and when, where, and who will do it. The first step, what to elicit or capture. Before each task of requirements achievement, we should determine the topic first. For example, our target software system is the library system. And surely we should achieve proper requirements for it. Before each requirement capture, you should determine the topic. Tomorrow will be returning book, and the day after tomorrow will be warehouse management, and so on. And next, should draft a questionnaire. That means should list out the questions that the business consultant will ask the users and the clients. So that means you cannot just talk freely with the users and the client. It should be planned beforehand. You know what you are going to talk, what you are going to discuss, or what you are going to make clear. We should understand that normally the user is impatient to describe. Actually, the user will be very busy. It will be better to make the user choose a judge. The users are very busy, okay? And the business consultant, the developers, try to collect as many requirements as possible in the shortest time. Okay? So to achieve this, all of this must be planned carefully beforehand, and should elicit the questions to make the client and users answer it much easier, and to make sure that they will provide as much information as possible. And actually, we should understand that choose or judge make things very clear, okay, exact. A or B. The next, the business consultant should determine the ways to capture requirements. Well, there are quite some ways to capture or to collect the requirements, such as interview users. Actually, this is a very useful, a very common way. We should never forget it. Since the users will be the future user of the target software system, surely it is very reasonable and very important, very necessary to talk with them, to get their needs, okay? To know what they are thinking, or to understand what they really need, what problem they are confronted right now. And the next is prepare for the questionnaires. Just now we have mentioned the importance of questionnaires. Okay? So Okay, never forget questionnaires. You know what you want to make clear. And the next, forms analysis. Forms mean the form that the users are using now. Let's say if there's no software system is available for the user, most of the time the user will just keep down all the information in some forms. Maybe they have many forms, different kind of forms. And the forms will give detailed information. So forms are very important and very useful of the source of requirements. Okay? And most of the time, the forms will tell us exactly what will be the data items. And then these data items will become a very important source of the attributes for the future entity classes. And next, video cameras. Sometimes the user's working environment will be very dangerous, or it's not so convenient to interview, or to just watch the process of their working, and then video cameras will help a lot. So that means we can just use cameras to record the process of the current working process, and then we can take back the records to study it in more detail. And next way is scenarios. Scenarios is a very important and a very useful way for the business consultant to talk with the users. Well, the users don't have any idea what the target software will be like, okay? And how will he interfere or how to use the target software, or how the target software will solve the problems for them. So what the business consultant should do is that try to imagine or figure out some scenarios for the users to let them to imagine what will happen with the target software. For example, if the business consultant are talking with the librarians in the library, okay, about the target software system, and then he can talk in this way with the librarians. Okay, so let's imagine now the target library information management system is available now, and it will help us to process the business of borrowing book or returning book and so on. Okay, so now let's imagine a student get some books that he wants to borrow out of the warehouse, and then he will take his card and the books to the counter. Okay, that means to you. And then you can use his card and the books to process the borrowing book with the target software system. And then they can imagine together. They should scan the card first, okay? And then if the card is okay to borrow more books, and then the librarians will scan the books to borrow. Well, okay, so all these imaginations is just for the scenarios. And some other ways, rapid prototyping. We should never forget that we are still at the phase of requirements. And we don't have any code, any documentation for the target software yet. And it's just some idea, okay, some blur idea in people's mind. And no one will know what the target software will be like, okay, and how to use it. Well, it is also quite difficult to imagine because software is abstract, okay? It's not just some concrete physical entities. We cannot just say how high it will be or what it will be its color, right? Okay. And we find that in other domains of engineering, such as building construction or bridge construction and so on. Okay. And before the construction, some modules, okay, will be available for the target bridge or building and so on. And the people can have a look and know what will the target project be like. And they can determine whether they like it or not, or whether it is what they want or what they need. So maybe you will ask whether it is possible to achieve some modules like this to help the developers, to help the business consultant and the client and users to discuss with each other and to understand each other better? Well, the answer is yes. It is also possible to achieve some rapid prototype with software. Actually, rapid prototyping is a very important and very useful, a very effective way to collect requirements, to achieve requirements. Because it is so important, so effective, that this will be the next lecture. We'll learn rapid prototyping deeper. Okay, so much for rapid prototyping right now. Next week, interview experts. We should never forget that our target software system is trying to solve the domain problems. And what is the problems exactly? And how to solve it? What is the best solution for it? And all such questions. So sometimes it is a very useful way to talk or to interview with experts of the domain. And then you will get the best solution for it. And the next, to analyze existing similar product. Well, sometimes there's some similar product already. For example, now you are supposed to develop a library management system, and you know that some organization is using some kind of library management system already. So it is a good idea to analyze such kind of existing similar products. And you will get many useful requirements from it. It will be a very good reference for your target software. And next, elicit requirements from domain standards and rules. In some domain, most of the requirements will come from the domain standards and rules. It's not from some single organization or some individuals. For example, it's domain of banking or insurance. All of these domains or such kind of domains have its own standards and rules. It's not determined by some single organization or individuals. So it is very important and very necessary to make sure that the target software will follow the existing domain standards and rules. And the last, we should never forget to search materials from internet. And nowadays, internet is a very important source for information. Okay, so there are so many ways for us to choose for requirements capture. And finally, requirements analyst should conduct interviews to determine the time and the location and the individuals for the interview, for the requirements collecting. Because everyone is so busy, okay? Just now we have mentioned that the client and the user is busy, it has his own work, okay? So you should make sure that the person involved for this business collecting is available, okay? And determine the location. The location is in the software organization, or in the client's location, or the user's location, or somewhere else. And the individuals. The individuals of the software organizations, and also the individuals from the clients and the users' organizations. Because different topic of interview will require different person, right? For example, a library management system. And if the topic of this interview is just borrowing and returning book, and then they will need the libraries who's in charge of this business. And if the topic of this interview is the book warehouse management, and then the librarians in charge of the warehouse will be involved, should be involved. Okay, so this task 1, preparation. Well, task 2, requirements, elicit and record and analyze. That means to elicit and record and analyze the requirements. Actually, the product of this task is requirements information record table. Let's take an example of library management system. Let's say the topic for this requirements collecting is borrowing book for the library management system. And the requirement investigation method is interview and questionnaires and forms analysis. It is suitable. Okay, these 3 ways are suitable for this topic. And the investigators, for example, Zhang Fang, okay, this is the person from the software organization. Surely she is the business consultant. And the person investigated, Manager Li Ping, librarian Wang Fang, and so on. And these persons are the person from the library. They're the clients and the users. Next, investigation date and time. Let's say September 27th, 2012. It's from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. And the investigation location, it is at New Encheng Library of Northeastern University. And the requirement information record, it should include questions like what and how and so on. For example, the business consultant will ask, when does borrowing book happen? And then the client and the user will give their answer. It should be recorded. And the next, who is involved in borrowing book? And some answer. And the third question, is there any alternative flow of borrowing book? And so on. Okay. So that means each investigation should be recorded. Okay. So surely there should be many requirements investigation records for the project. For example, there should be other record about the returning book or about reservation and so on. The third task, requirements documentation. Actually, the final product of requirements phase is requirement documentation. Let's have a look. This is a template for requirements documentation. Well, the topic is requirement documentation and the document name. For example, the document name can be requirements documentation for a library management system for Northeastern University. Okay? And document number, its version number, its total pages, generated by the persons involved in this documentation. Maybe one person or more than one person. Okay? And surely these persons are the business consultants of the software organization. And the generated date, checked by. Checked by means tested by. In the previous lectures, we have understood that all kinds of documents also need testing. So this requirement documentation also needs testing. It's checked by some person and check the date. And finally, this documentation is approved by somebody. For example, here, a software organization is supposed to develop a library management system for Northeastern University. And then, after this requirement documentation is achieved, it should be reviewed or it should be checked by both the software organization and the Northeastern University to make sure that both sides agree with the target software's business requirements. So both the people in charge of the software organization and the Northeastern University should sign here to make sure that they agree with this requirement documentation and their approved date. And the following information will include the version modification record. Surely this documentation will be modified more than once, okay, and maybe by different persons. Well, each modification should be kept down, should be recorded. The serial number and the modification date, version modified by somebody, and what is modified. Well, this is the content of the document. Project name. Let's say, Library Management System of Northeastern University. Okay, next item, project description. Is the brief description of the project, including background, the clients and users, and the purpose, and the basic functionalities, and so on. So that means this project description should tell the readers what this project is for, and its background, and its purpose. So that means give the readers a general idea about the target software. And the user introduction. The users will be the target software faces. The users are the persons that the software will face. So that means the user, okay, of the target software system. And who are they? What the roles that they are trying to play, and what's their responsibility. Okay. And glossaries, including the terms and the abbreviations list. For example, borrowing book. This will be a term in the domain of library management system. And the ATM, this is an abbreviation in the bank system. And it should be explained what is it. Functional requirements. This is the core of this document. It should cover all the functionalities that will be needed for the target software. That means all the functions that will be needed to solve the clients and the users' problem, to meet their needs. For example, for the case of library management system, and then the functional requirements will include borrowing book, returning book, reserve book, and the book management. That means how the book should be numbered. So all of this belong to this part, functional requirements. And finally, the next part, non-functional requirements. Functional requirements has something to do with the business logic directly. Well, non-functional requirements mean the requirements does not have something to do with the business logic directly. Well, it may cover the requirements for user interface. What kind of user interface? Is the user interface supposed to be touched? Okay. For example, the ATM system, the screen can be touched to operate. Yeah? And the requirements for software or hardware? Well, the target software system will run on a PC or on a AS400 and so on. And what will be the operating system? Will it be Windows or Linux? And what will be the server, or what will be the database? For example, okay, maybe the users want a free database, and then MySQL will be a good choice. But if the size of the business is quite large, and then maybe you can choose an Oracle or a DB2 and so on. Requirements for performance. How fast will the target software operate or response? And how many users can be accepted? How many users can access the target software at the same time, and so on. And the requirements for robustness. Well, when we learn about the topic of testing, we have learned the definition for robustness, right? That means what kind of environment, okay, or what the mean time between failures, and so on. Securities. Some systems will have a very strong requirement for security. If there are some finance or money involved, okay, or personal information, and so on, okay, and then the security will be very, very important. Architecture. For example, if an online shop is supposed to develop, and surely the architecture should be something like BS, browser server, and surely CS cannot solve the problem, right? And maybe other requirements. So we find that all of these requirements are very important, and they don't interact, or they don't have something to do with the business logic directly. Well, we can't say that all software system will have the requirements for all of these. Maybe some has requirements for user interface only, okay, and maybe some has only security and the performance. So that means whatever is needed, you just put it here. If it is not required, okay, don't talk about it, right? Don't mention it, right? Okay, so much for the explanation for the requirements documentation. The last task, okay, requirements confirmation. That means both the client and the users should sign the requirements documentation. Okay? Just now, when we talk about these templates, okay, we have explained that here approved by both the development team and the users. That means only both the client and users agree with the requirement documentation, and then it can guarantee that finally a satisfactory software system will be achieved, will be developed for them. And also, just now from the requirement documentation template, we have found that there are two types of requirements, functional and non-functional. The definition for functional requirements is that it is related to the functionality of the target software directly. And the non-functional requirements mean the properties of the targeted software, such as reliability, maintainability, and relate to the environment in which the software will run. So actually, after studying this lecture, okay, you have already understand that to achieve requirement is very practical. Okay? It should be planned, and it should be done carefully, okay, and properly. And we should never forget that proper documentation should be achieved, including the requirements records and the requirements documentation. And actually, the requirement documentation should be the appendix of the contract between the development organization and the client. Actually, you students are required to group into teams. Each team has 3 to 5 students, And each team should choose your own topic, that means your own project for your team, okay? Such as documentation management system, or maybe a library management system, and so on. And then each team members are supposed to go to the users to collect requirements. And then finally, each team should achieve requirement documentation for your own team project. Well, okay, so much for this lecture. Thank you.